The massive alien ships appeared in Earth's sky on a Tuesday morning. They blocked out the sun over major cities, their dark hulls stretching for miles. People stopped their cars and stared up at the impossible sight. Children pointed from school windows while their teachers tried to remain calm. Commander Zethkar stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking down at the blue and green planet below. His scaled hands moved across the control panels as data flowed across the screens. This world was called Earth, and it was home to creatures that called themselves humans. "What did the scans show?" he asked his science officer. "Very primitive, sir," came the reply. "No telepathic abilities detected. No energy manipulation powers. Their lifespans are incredibly short, less than 100 cycles. Their technology appears to be chemical-based propulsion and basic electronics." Zethkar's eyes narrowed as he studied the data. In his 300 years of service to the Galactic Empire, he had conquered dozens of worlds. Every species they encountered had something special about them. The crystal-skinned Vorthani could control gravity with their minds. The gaseous ethereals could phase in and out of reality. The machine hybrid Nexus could connect directly to any computer system. But these humans seemed to have nothing at all. "Look at this," the science officer continued, pointing to images on the screen. "They still fight wars among themselves. They use metal projectiles as weapons. Their fastest ships barely reach a fraction of light speed." Zethkar studied the images of human cities, their primitive vehicles, their laughably simple aircraft. "Perhaps they could serve as laborers," he said. "The Empire always needs workers for the mining colonies." Down on Earth, the world's leaders were gathering in emergency sessions. President Sarah Chen of the United States spoke with Premier Liu Wei of China through secure video links. Prime Minister James Thompson of Britain was on another call with President Dubois of France. For the first time in decades, the old enemies were talking without shouting. "We need to present a united front," Secretary General Maria Santos said during the emergency United Nations session. "Whatever these aliens want, we must speak with one voice." Admiral Chen Wei, head of Earth's combined military forces, stood beside her. He was a quiet man with gray hair and careful eyes. "Our satellites show their ships carry weapons that could destroy entire continents," he reported. "We are completely outmatched." The alien communication came 3 days later. A beam of energy struck the communications satellite network, and suddenly every screen on Earth displayed the same image. Commander Zethkar appeared, his reptilian features and glowing eyes visible to every human on the planet. "Greetings, humans of Earth." His voice was translated into every human language simultaneously. "I am Commander Zethkar of the Galactic Empire's exploratory fleet. Your world has been discovered and evaluated." Maria Santos stood in the UN building in New York, knowing that billions of people were watching. The alien had requested to speak with Earth's leaders, and she had been chosen to represent humanity. "We come in peace," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "We welcome contact with your people." Zethkar's expression showed what might have been amusement. "Peace is not a choice you have to make, primitive. Your species lacks the power to threaten anyone. We offer you protection and guidance in exchange for your cooperation." "What kind of cooperation?" Santos asked. "Mining rights to your mineral resources, a portion of your population to work in our facilities throughout the galaxy. In return, we will protect you from hostile species and share basic technology to improve your simple lives." Santos looked at Admiral Chen, who stood beside her. They had prepared for this moment, but actually facing it was different than any simulation. "We would like to see a demonstration of your capabilities," she said, "and we would like to show you ours." The alien commander seemed pleased by this request. "Very well. We will meet on your moon in one of your days. Bring your finest warriors and your greatest weapons. We shall do the same." The next day, human shuttles launched toward the moon using chemical rockets that left bright trails across the sky. The aliens watched with what appeared to be boredom as the primitive craft slowly climbed out of Earth's gravity well. On the moon's surface, the humans set up their demonstration area. Admiral Chen led a team of soldiers who carried what appeared to be standard military weapons. They wore simple spacesuits and moved awkwardly in the low gravity. The aliens arrived in sleek craft that made no sound and left no exhaust. Commander Zethkar wore a simple breathing mask, his species apparently comfortable in the lunar environment. His soldiers carried weapons that hummed with energy and moved with inhuman grace. "Show us what you can do," Zethkar said. The humans began their demonstration. They fired their weapons at targets showing basic marksmanship. They displayed their communication equipment, their simple computers, their mathematical calculations. Everything appeared exactly as primitive as the aliens expected. Admiral Chen stepped forward. "We are proud of our progress," he said. "In just a few thousand years, we have learned to use fire, invented the wheel, and reached our moon. We hope to learn from your advanced civilization." The alien soldiers demonstrated next. They fired energy weapons that vaporized boulders. They showed personal force fields that deflected projectiles. One soldier lifted a massive rock using only his mind, while another became translucent and walked through solid stone. "Impressive," Santos said, and she meant it. The technology gap was enormous. "This is not even our advanced technology," Zethkar replied. "These are standard equipment for our basic soldiers. Your entire civilization appears to be at the level we reached 50,000 years ago." Santos nodded. "We understand that we have much to learn. However, we would like some time to consider your offer. Our governments must discuss this decision." "Governments?" The alien commander seemed confused. "Are you not the leader of your species?" "Earth has many nations," Santos explained. "Each has its own government. We must consult with all of them before making such an important decision." Zethkar's expression showed surprise and then dismissal. "Fragmented authority is a sign of primitive social development. Very well. You have one cycle of your moon to consider our generous offer. When I return, you will accept our protection or face the consequences of your stubbornness." The alien ships departed, leaving Earth's skies clear once again. But everything had changed. Humanity now knew they were not alone in the universe, and they were far from the strongest species out there. In secure bunkers around the world, Earth's leaders began emergency meetings. But these were not the scared gatherings of a primitive species facing superior technology. Behind closed doors, people who had been enemies for decades began sharing secrets that had been hidden for over a century. Phase 1 is complete. Admiral Chen reported to the Secret Council that included leaders from every major nation. "They believe exactly what we wanted them to believe." Maria Santos looked around the room at faces she had known for years, people who had been preparing for this day since they were children. "Then we move to Phase 2. How long until they return?" 30 days, Chen replied. "More than enough time." Dr. Keiko Tanaka, head of the Classified Research Division, smiled grimly. "After watching their demonstration, we can confirm our analysis. Their technology is exactly what we expected based on our deep space observations. Our countermeasures should be effective. And if we're wrong?" asked Premier Liu Wei. Santos looked out the window at the city above, where normal people continued their daily lives, unaware of what was really happening. "Then we die free instead of living as slaves. But I don't think we're wrong. We've been preparing for this contact for over 100 years. Every war we fought taught us something. Every weapon we've built had this day in mind." She turned back to the group. "They think we're primitives who stumbled into civilization by accident. They're about to learn that sometimes being underestimated is the greatest advantage of all." The moment the alien ships disappeared beyond Earth's atmosphere, something remarkable began to happen across the planet. In Washington, President Sarah Chen picked up a red phone that connected directly to Beijing. In Moscow, Premier Volkov opened channels to NATO commanders who had been his enemies just hours before. In every capital city, leaders who had spent years in conflict suddenly began working together. The change was so swift and complete that it seemed impossible. Intelligence agencies that had spied on each other for decades began sharing their most classified files. Military commanders who had planned against each other started combining their strategies. Scientists who had competed for resources suddenly found themselves with unlimited budgets and complete access to research from around the world. Dr. Keiko Tanaka stood in a facility that did not appear on any official map. It was built beneath the Swiss Alps, connected by tunnels to similar installations under the Rocky Mountains, the Siberian wilderness, and the Australian outback. For 30 years she had directed research that officially did not exist. "Report," she said to the assembled group of scientists, military leaders and intelligence officials. General Morrison, who commanded the North American sector, spoke first. "All defense installations are coming online. The orbital platforms that have been disguised as communication satellites are powering up their weapon systems. The lunar facilities are fully operational. Dr. Chen Yuki, head of the Psychological Warfare Division, added her update. Analysis of the alien contact is complete. Their behavioral patterns match our predictions almost perfectly. They think in hierarchical terms, superior and inferior, dominant and submissive. They cannot understand cooperation between equals. Dr. Tanaka nodded. What about their technology? Exactly as we expected, replied Dr. Sarah Martinez, the chief engineer. Their energy weapons are powerful but predictable. Their force fields operate on frequencies we can counter. Their mental abilities work through quantum field manipulation that we can disrupt. Admiral Chen Wei, who had played his role perfectly during the lunar meeting, allowed himself a small smile. They completely believed our performance. To them, we appeared as primitive as we intended. The truth was that humanity had been preparing for this contact for over 100 years. It had begun during World War II, when radio telescopes first detected signals from deep space that were clearly artificial. Governments had quietly begun the longest military preparation in human history. Every major conflict since then had been, in part, a training exercise. The Cold War had taught nations how to maintain massive secret projects. The space race had provided cover for building military installations throughout the solar system. Computer development had been guided toward creating the distributed command networks that now connected every defense installation on Earth. Show me the real inventory, Dr. Tanaka said. The display that appeared would have shocked the aliens, who thought they were dealing with primitive chemical rockets. Hidden throughout the solar system were facilities that had been built over decades. Asteroid mining operations were actually weapons platforms. Scientific research stations were military bases. Even the International Space Station had been constructed around a core of advanced weapon systems. The Chinese lunar installation has been operational for 15 years, General Liu reported. The American Mars facility came online last month. The Russian stations in the asteroid belt are fully armed and staffed. But the most important revelation was not about technology, it was about humanity itself. The psychological profile is complete, Dr. Yuki said. We now understand why no other species has successfully resisted the Empire. They all think like individuals. When faced with superior force, they calculate survival odds and surrender when the numbers don't work in their favor. Dr. Tanaka studied the data. And humans? We don't think like that. When humans face impossible odds, we don't calculate survival rates. We get angry. We start looking for ways to make the enemy pay a price they can't afford. This was the secret weapon that no alien species had ever encountered. Humans were not just pack animals who cooperated for mutual benefit. They were a species that could form emotional bonds with complete strangers, that would sacrifice their own lives for abstract concepts like freedom and dignity, that became more dangerous when cornered instead of more compliant. Maria Santos stood in the real command center, not the public UN building where she had met the aliens. This facility coordinated the activities of every government on Earth. The walls showed displays from installations across the solar system, from the ice mines of Europa that were actually shipyards, to the solar research stations that were weapons platforms positioned close to the sun. Time remaining? She asked. 23 days until they return, Admiral Chen replied. Status of all systems? Green across the board. Every installation is fully operational. All personnel are at their positions. The civilian populations have been briefed and are ready. This last point was crucial. Unlike other species the Empire had conquered, humans had not kept their defensive preparations secret from their own people. Every civilian on Earth knew that their governments had been preparing for possible alien contact. More importantly, every civilian was prepared to fight if necessary. The Empire's standard strategy relied on threatening civilian populations to force government surrender. They had never encountered a species where the civilians were as committed to resistance as the military. Dr. Martinez reported on the final preparations. All stealth systems are operational. Our ships will remain invisible until we choose to reveal them. The planetary defense grid can be activated in 30 seconds. The counterattack systems are positioned and ready. What about the deception plan? Santos asked. Perfect, Dr. Yuki replied. Our behavior during the lunar meeting convinced them that we are exactly what we appeared to be. Frightened primitives who are awed by their technology. They expect us to surrender immediately when they return. The next 3 weeks saw the most intense activity in human history, but none of it was visible from space. Factory production continued normally, but the products were different than they appeared. Civilian spacecraft launched on schedule, but their cargoes were not what the manifests claimed. Scientific research continued publicly, but the real experiments were happening in hidden laboratories. Most importantly, the human population prepared mentally for what was coming. This was perhaps the most alien concept to the Empire, a species where every individual was psychologically prepared to die fighting rather than live as slaves. Children attended schools where they learned not just mathematics and literature, but also basic military skills. Parents made plans for protecting their families that included weapons training and guerrilla warfare tactics. Elderly citizens volunteered for roles that would put them in harm's way to protect younger generations. The aliens could not have understood this behavior because they had never encountered it. Every species in the Empire viewed death as the ultimate defeat. Humans viewed death in service of freedom as victory. On the final day before the alien return, Santos received reports from around the world. Every major city appeared normal from orbit, but was actually a fortified position. Every industrial facility seemed to be producing civilian goods, but was actually manufacturing military supplies. Every civilian seemed to be going about their normal life, but was actually a trained resistance fighter. "Are we ready?" she asked Admiral Chen. "We are ready for war," he replied. "But more than that, we are ready to show them something they have never seen before, which is a species that gets stronger when attacked, a species that becomes more united when threatened, a species that will choose death over slavery, every time." The alien ships reappeared in Earth's sky exactly 30 days after their first departure. Commander Zethkar expected to find a frightened human population ready to accept his generous offer of protection. Instead, he received a message from Maria Santos that would change the course of galactic history. "Commander Zethkar," her voice came through the communication system, calm and clear. "We have considered your offer carefully. Our answer is no. Earth will remain independent." There was a moment of silence before the alien commander's laughter filled the channel. "You cannot be serious, Primitive. You have no choice in this matter." Santos's response carried no fear, no uncertainty, no room for negotiation. "Then you have chosen war. You should have studied us more carefully, Commander. You are about to learn why humans are the only species on their home planet that has no natural predators." The first shot of the war was fired 30 seconds later. Commander Zethkar gave the order to begin orbital bombardment with complete confidence. His fleet had destroyed hundreds of worlds. The humans would surrender within hours once they saw their cities burning. The massive energy beams lanced down from the alien ships, targeting Earth's major population centers: New York, London, Beijing, Moscow, Tokyo. All were struck simultaneously with enough power to vaporize entire city blocks, but the energy beams never reached the ground. Instead, they struck invisible barriers that suddenly blazed to life around every major city on Earth. The alien weapons, designed to penetrate any known defensive technology, simply dissipated against the glowing shields like water hitting stone. "Impossible," Zethkar whispered, staring at his displays. The scans showed no defensive installations. His science officer frantically worked at the controls. "Sir, massive energy signatures are appearing all across the planet. Our previous scans must have been deceived somehow." That was exactly what had happened. For decades, human engineers had been perfecting stealth technology that could hide installations from any scanning method the Empire used. The planetary defense grid had been built slowly, piece by piece, hidden beneath cities and mountains and ocean floors. But the real shock came when the human counterattack began. What the aliens had dismissed as primitive rockets suddenly revealed their true nature. Thousands of missiles launched from hidden silos. But these were not the simple chemical-fueled weapons the aliens expected. They moved with impossible speed and agility, their trajectories changing unpredictably as they climbed toward the alien fleet. Each missile seemed to learn from the attempts to destroy it. When alien point defense systems shot down the first wave, the second wave adapted, using different approach patterns that the defenses could not predict. When force fields blocked some missiles, others found ways through the gaps. "Evasive maneuvers," Zethkar ordered, but it was too late. The human weapons struck with devastating effect. But it was not just the explosions that shocked the alien commander. It was what happened next. Space around the alien fleet suddenly filled with ships that had not existed moments before. Asteroids revealed themselves as hollowed-out warships. Pieces of space debris powered up with energy signatures that matched Imperial technology. Even the wreckage from destroyed human missiles reformed into attack drones. Admiral Chen Wei coordinated the battle from his command center deep beneath the Himalayas. Around him, officers from every nation on Earth worked side by side, their old conflicts forgotten in the face of a common enemy. Second wave launching, reported Colonel Martinez from the lunar facilities. All asteroid belt installations are firing. Jupiter Squadron is moving to intercept their reserve fleet, added General Liu from the Chinese Orbital Command. The battle was unlike anything in the Empire's experience. Human ships did not fight like individuals seeking personal glory or survival. They moved in perfect coordination, like a single organism with thousands of parts. When one ship was destroyed, others immediately moved to cover its position. When a group was outnumbered, reinforcements appeared from impossible directions. But the most disturbing thing for the aliens was how humans fought when their ships were boarded. Captain Sarah Mitchell led her security team through the corridors of her damaged cruiser as alien soldiers forced their way aboard. These enemies were physically superior, stronger, faster, with better reflexes and natural armor. In a fair fight, no human could match them. So the humans did not fight fair. They used the ship's artificial gravity against the aliens, switching it on and off to disorient enemies who were not prepared for the change. They vented atmosphere from sections of the ship, forcing the aliens to retreat while humans continued fighting in vacuum with simple breathing masks. Most shocking of all, humans used tactics that no other species had ever employed. They sacrificed themselves to destroy enemies. When alien soldiers cornered Mitchell's team in the engine room, she armed the reactor's self-destruct system and refused to evacuate. "Tell Earth that Defiant Squadron held the line," she transmitted to the fleet, then detonated her entire ship to take out the alien boarding party and damage 2 enemy vessels. This behavior was so alien to Imperial thinking that it caused panic among the alien crews. Every species they had encountered fought for individual survival. The concept of deliberately choosing death to achieve a military objective was completely outside their understanding. Commander Zethkar watched his tactical display with growing horror as the battle developed. His fleet was not just losing, it was being systematically destroyed by enemies who used strategies that made no sense. Why do they not retreat when outnumbered? He asked his staff.
Why do they not surrender when faced with certain death?
His intelligence officer, a member of the telepathic Mindari species, provided an answer that chilled every alien on the bridge. "Sir, I have been monitoring human communications. They do not think like any species we have encountered. When they calculate odds of survival, they include the survival of their entire species, not just themselves." Explain. A human will die to save other humans they have never met. They will sacrifice themselves for ideas that exist only in their minds. They view death in service of their species as a form of victory, not defeat. This was the key difference that the Empire had failed to understand. Every other species they conquered consisted of individuals who prioritized personal survival. Humans were willing to die for abstractions like freedom, dignity, and the future of their species. The battle raged for 18 hours. When it ended, the alien fleet had lost 60% of its ships. The human losses were also severe, but the survivors were already rebuilding and preparing for the next engagement. Commander Zethkar, his flagship damaged and half his fleet destroyed, finally understood what they were facing. These were not primitive beings who had stumbled into space travel. They were a species that had spent their entire evolutionary history fighting impossible odds and winning through cooperation, adaptability, and sheer stubborn refusal to surrender. He opened a communication channel to Earth, expecting to negotiate with a defeated enemy. Instead, Maria Santos appeared on his screen, standing in a command center that showed no sign of damage or panic. "Commander," she said calmly, "I hope this demonstration has been educational." "You have won this battle," Zethkar replied, trying to maintain some dignity. "But the Empire has thousands of fleets. You cannot resist us all." Santos smiled, and the expression was somehow more frightening than anger would have been. "You're right. We cannot defeat thousands of fleets using conventional tactics. Fortunately, We don't intend to fight conventionally. Before Zethkar could ask what she meant, his tactical officer reported something impossible. Sir, human ships are appearing throughout Empire space. Long-range sensors show attacks on our supply bases, communications relays, and administrative centers. How is that possible? Their technology cannot achieve faster than light travel at our speed. Santos answered the question. You're correct. Our ships cannot match your FTL drives, so we sent them the slow way. For the past 5 years, human volunteers have been traveling to Empire worlds in cold sleep, positioning weapons and gathering intelligence. Today, they all activated simultaneously. The truth hit Zethkar like a physical blow. While the Empire had been monitoring Earth for primitive technology, humans had been infiltrating Empire space using methods so simple that Imperial security had not even looked for them. This is not possible, he whispered. Commander, Santos replied. You have been thinking like every other species the Empire has conquered. You assumed that because we appeared primitive, we were harmless. You assumed that because we seemed divided, we were weak. You assumed that because we valued individual lives, we would not sacrifice them for victory. She paused, letting him absorb the full impact of his errors. You were wrong about everything. We are not primitive, we are patient. We are not divided, we are diverse. And we do not just value individual lives. We value the freedom of our entire species more than our individual survival. The communication ended, leaving Zethkar staring at a blank screen. Around him, reports continued to arrive of human attacks throughout Empire space. Facilities that had been secure for centuries were being destroyed by weapons that should not have been able to reach them. For the first time in his 300 years of life, the alien commander felt something he had never experienced before. Fear of an enemy that thought completely differently than any opponent he had ever faced. The humans had not just won a battle. They had introduced a new kind of warfare to the galaxy, one based not on superior technology or individual strength, but on collective will and the willingness to sacrifice everything for an idea. And this was only the beginning. Emperor Vaxthul had ruled the Galactic Empire for 800 years. In all that time, no species had successfully resisted Imperial conquest for more than a few months. The humans had been fighting for over a year, and they were getting stronger. Standing in his throne room on the capital world of Draconis Prime, the Emperor studied the reports from across his domain. Human sabotage operations had destroyed supply depots on 14 worlds. Communication networks were being disrupted by weapons that appeared from nowhere. Most disturbing of all, some client species were beginning to ask questions about human methods of resistance. This ends now, he declared to his assembled military commanders. I will personally lead the largest fleet in Imperial history to destroy these primitives. We will make an example that will prevent any other species from following their path. The fleet that assembled for the assault on Earth was truly massive, over 10,000 warships carrying planet-killing weapons. It included representatives from every major Empire species, commanded by the Emperor's most experienced generals. The journey to Earth would take several months, but when they arrived, no human weapon would be able to stop them. At least that was the plan. But during the months it took the Imperial fleet to reach Earth, humanity did not simply wait to be destroyed. Instead, they did something that shocked even their own leaders. They evolved. Dr. Chen's distributed research network, which connected laboratories and workshops across human space, began producing technological advances at an impossible pace. Working in conditions that would have killed most other species, human engineers developed new weapons and defenses in weeks instead of decades. The secret was humanity's greatest advantage, their ability to adapt quickly under pressure. While other species needed years to develop and test new technology, humans were willing to build and deploy experimental weapons in the middle of a war. Lieutenant Commander Maria Rodriguez worked in a laboratory on Luna that had been converted from a mining operation. Around her, engineers from 12 different nations collaborated on projects that had been theoretical just months before. The new shield generators are ready for testing, reported Dr. Kim, the Korean physicist who had designed them. They should be able to absorb energy weapons up to Class 7 intensity. Install them immediately, Rodriguez ordered. We'll test them in combat. This willingness to use untested technology in life-or-death situations gave humans a crucial advantage. While Imperial engineers spent years in careful testing and evaluation, humans were willing to gamble their lives on equipment that might not work. But technology was only part of humanity's evolution. The real change was in how they fought. The second battle was not fought around Earth alone, but throughout the entire solar system. Mars had been transformed from a terraforming project into a massive shipyard that produced new vessels faster than the Empire could destroy them. The asteroid belt was now a maze of fortified positions and hidden weapons platforms. Even the outer planets had been converted into military installations. When Emperor Vaxthul arrived with his massive fleet, he found that the solar system itself had become a weapon designed to destroy invaders. The first shock came when the Imperial fleet encountered human ships that appeared to be made from asteroids and scrap metal. These crude-looking vessels should have been destroyed easily, but instead they fought with impossible effectiveness. Captain Torres commanded one of these makeshift warships, built around the core of a converted mining platform. Her crew included former enemies, Russians, Americans, Chinese, and Europeans working together as if they had never been at war with each other. Enemy fleet approaching at Vector 77 Mark 12, reported her tactical officer, a Japanese woman who had been a car designer before the war. All stations, prepare for engagement, Torres ordered. Remember, we don't need to destroy them all. We just need to make them pay a price they can't afford. This was the key insight that had driven human strategy from the beginning. They understood that the Empire's greatest weakness was not technological, but psychological. Imperial forces were used to easy victories against opponents who surrendered when faced with overwhelming odds. Humans never surrendered, even when surrender would save lives. The battle that followed was unlike anything in the Empire's military history. Human ships did not try to win through superior firepower. They won through tactics that Imperial commanders could not predict or counter. When Imperial forces targeted human civilian installations, expecting the humans to surrender to protect innocent lives, they discovered that human civilians were not innocent bystanders. Every human settlement was also a military base. Every human citizen was also a trained soldier. Rodriguez found herself commanding the defense of Luna City when Imperial forces broke through the outer defenses. As enemy troops stormed through the dome's emergency airlocks, she realized that the battle would be fought in the city's streets and tunnels. All civilian personnel, implement Protocol 7, she announced over the city's communication system. Protocol 7 was something that would have been impossible for any other species. It meant that every human in the city, from children to elderly citizens, became part of the military defense, not as helpless victims to be protected, but as active participants in the battle. The Imperial forces, trained to fight against military opponents, found themselves facing an entire population that refused to be conquered. Human children carried messages through tunnels too small for adult soldiers. Elderly humans operated weapon systems from hidden bunkers. Parents fought alongside their children in battles that should have been hopeless. But the most shocking moment came when the city's atmospheric dome was breached by Imperial energy weapons. The thin artificial atmosphere began venting into space, creating conditions that should have forced immediate human surrender. Instead, Rodriguez watched as her people simply put on breathing masks and continued fighting. Imperial troops, who were used to comfortable environmental controls and expected their enemies to panic when faced with hostile conditions, found themselves psychologically shattered by humans who treated vacuum exposure as a minor inconvenience. "How do you fight an enemy that will not be intimidated?" asked General Korthval, the Empire's most experienced commander, as he watched his forces take casualties in what should have been a simple occupation. Emperor Vaxthul had no answer. Standing on his flagship bridge, watching the tactical displays show his massive fleet suffering devastating losses, he began to understand that they were not fighting a normal war. "Sir," his intelligence chief reported, "human resistance is actually increasing as their casualties mount. Our psychological warfare specialists report that human morale improves when they are losing." "That is impossible," the Emperor replied. "No species becomes more dangerous when defeated." "Humans do, sir. Our analysis suggests that they view individual death in service of their species as a form of victory." They become more committed to fighting when they believe their cause is hopeless. This was the fundamental difference that the Empire had failed to grasp. Every other species they had conquered fought for individual survival and would surrender when the cost became too high. Humans fought for ideas, freedom, dignity, the right to determine their own future, and these ideas became more important to them when threatened. The turning point came when human counterattacks began appearing deep within Empire space. Not just the sabotage operations they had been conducting, but full military assaults on Imperial worlds that should have been impossible to reach. How are they doing this? Vaxithul demanded. Our intelligence reports show no human faster-than-light capability that could transport invasion forces. The answer came from captured human personnel, though it took Imperial interrogators weeks to understand what they were being told. Humans had been willing to spend years in cold sleep, traveling to Empire worlds at slower-than-light speeds, to position weapons and personnel where the Empire never expected them. More incredibly, these had been volunteer missions. Humans had chosen to spend decades of their short lives traveling through space for operations they might not survive to see completed. They have been infiltrating our space for over a decade, the intelligence report concluded, using methods so primitive that our security systems never detected them. Single-person craft, hidden in asteroid debris, traveling at speeds that make the journey take subjective years. But the most disturbing revelation was yet to come. "Sir," the communication officer reported, his voice shaking, "we are receiving reports from across the Empire. Client species are beginning to ask questions about human resistance methods. Some are requesting to study human tactics. There are rumors of secret meetings to discuss alternatives to Imperial protection." For the first time in 8 centuries, Emperor Vaxithul felt the emotion that had driven human evolution from the beginning. Fear. Not fear of death, which was simply biological, but fear of an idea spreading beyond his ability to control. The idea that there might be alternatives to surrender. Looking at the tactical displays showing his grand fleet being destroyed by primitives who should not have been able to resist Imperial technology, Vaxithul realized that this war was about more than conquering one small world. The message arrived at the Imperial capital 18 months after the first shot had been fired. It was not a military communication or a diplomatic demand. It was a simple request, transmitted on frequencies that every species in the galaxy could receive. The Galactic Empire is invited to send representatives to discuss terms for ending hostilities. Negotiations will be held at the Neutral Station Harmony Point. Humanity looks forward to beginning a new era of galactic cooperation. Emperor. Vaxithul stared at the message for a long time. Cooperation. Not surrender, not conquest, but cooperation. In 1,000 years of Imperial history, no enemy had ever used that word. His military advisors had been giving him the same reports for months. Imperial losses were approaching 30% of total military capacity. Human attacks were appearing on worlds that should have been impossible to reach. Most dangerous of all, client species throughout the Empire were beginning to ask questions that had never been asked before. Questions like, why do we need Imperial protection? And what would happen if we said no? The negotiating station was a marvel of engineering, built in neutral space by species that had never worked together before. Humans had provided the basic design, but Vorthani gravity manipulators had shaped the structure. Ethereal phase shift technology had created spaces that existed in multiple dimensions, and even Nexus computer interfaces had been integrated into systems that somehow allowed all species to communicate as equals. Secretary General Maria Santos walked through corridors that seemed to adapt to each visitor's needs. The artificial gravity adjusted for species that needed different orientations. The atmosphere changed to accommodate beings who breathed different gases. The lighting shifted to frequencies that each species' eyes could process. It was, she realized, a physical demonstration of the human concept that had been spreading throughout the galaxy. The idea that different did not mean inferior. Emperor Vaxithul arrived with an escort of his most powerful warships, but he came to the station alone. For the first time in his 800 years of life, he was about to negotiate with an enemy as an equal. The meeting room was simple, a round table that placed no one at the head, chairs that adjusted to each species' physiology, and translation systems that conveyed not just words, but the emotional concepts behind them. "What are you?" was the first thing Vaxthul asked when he saw Santos face to face. The question was not about biology or technology. It was deeper than that. In all his centuries of conquest, he had never encountered anything like humanity. Santos considered her answer carefully. "We are what happens when evolution does not give you natural weapons," she said. "We are what happens when a species has to think their way out of every problem. We are what happens when survival depends on cooperation instead of domination." She gestured to the station around them. "Look where we are meeting, Emperor." This station was built by former enemies working together. Every species that contributed to its construction learned something from the others. The Vorthani learned human engineering principles. The Ethereals discovered Nexus computational methods. The Nexus incorporated biological systems they had never imagined. Vaxthul studied the human across from him. She was so small, so fragile by the standards of most galactic species. Her lifespan was barely a tenth of his own, yet she represented a force that had brought his ancient empire to the negotiating table. "Your military forces are impressive," he admitted. "Your tactics are creative, but that cannot be all. No species achieves what you have achieved through warfare alone." Santos smiled. "You are right. Our weapons and our tactics were never our greatest strength. Our greatest strength is something that your empire has never encountered before, which is the ability to make other people believe that change is possible." Over the following days, the negotiations revealed the full scope of what had been happening throughout the galaxy. Human advisors had been appearing on client worlds not as conquerors or rulers, but as teachers. They showed other species new ways of thinking about old problems. On agricultural worlds, humans had introduced crop rotation methods that increased yields without requiring imperial technology. On industrial planets, they had demonstrated manufacturing techniques that reduced resource consumption while improving quality. On research stations, they had shared scientific methods that accelerated discovery. But most importantly, they had introduced ideas. The idea that client species did not have to accept the limitations they had been born with. The idea that cooperation between different species could achieve more than domination by one species. The idea that every being had the right to choose their own path, regardless of their species' traditional role in the galactic hierarchy. "You have infected my empire with a virus," Vaxthul said, and Santos was surprised to hear what might have been admiration in his translated voice. "Not a virus," she corrected. "A seed. The seed of possibility." Dr. Tanaka's reports transmitted from across human space revealed the full scope of the transformation that was beginning. Species that had been imperial clients for centuries were experimenting with self-governance. Research projects were being conducted cooperatively between species that had never worked together. Most remarkably, young beings from different species were choosing to study on human worlds, learning methods of problem-solving that emphasized creativity over hierarchy. "What do you want?" Vaxthul asked finally. "What are your terms for peace?" Santos looked at the Emperor. This ancient being who had ruled most of the galaxy for longer than human civilization had existed. "We do not want to destroy your empire," she said. "We want to transform it." The treaty that emerged from those negotiations was unlike any document in galactic history. It did not establish victory or defeat, conqueror or conquered. Instead, it created something entirely new, a framework for cooperation between independent species. The empire would continue to exist, but its role would change from ruler to coordinator. Client species would have the right to choose their own governments and determine their own futures. Resources and technology would be shared based on mutual benefit rather than imperial decree. Most importantly, any species would have the right to say no to imperial requests without facing military consequences. But the real revolution was not in the treaty itself. It was in what happened after the treaty was signed. Within months of the peace agreement, human teachers began appearing throughout imperial space. Not as occupiers or administrators, but as partners in transformation. They worked with local populations to develop new approaches to governance, new methods of resource management, new ways of resolving conflicts between different species. Admiral Chen Wei stood on the observation deck of humanity's first official embassy ship as it approached the imperial capital. The vessel carried not weapons or warriors, but teachers, engineers, artists, and philosophers. Their mission was not conquest or defense. It was transformation. Status report, he requested from the ship's commander. All departments ready, Admiral. The education teams have prepared curricula for 17 different species. The engineering groups have solutions for resource distribution problems on 43 worlds. The diplomatic corps is ready to begin establishing cooperative agreements with client species throughout the Empire. Chen nodded, watching the ancient capital world grow larger on the viewing screens. And our long-term objectives? Exactly as planned, sir. We are not here to rule or to be ruled. We are here to teach other species that they have choices they never knew existed. The real victory was not military. It was philosophical. Humanity had introduced to the galaxy something that had been missing for millennia. The concept that any system, no matter how old or established, could be changed if enough people were willing to work together to change it. Dr. Yuki's final analysis, transmitted to Earth from her new research station in Imperial space, summarized what had been accomplished. We did not defeat the Galactic Empire through superior technology or military force. We defeated it by showing every species in the galaxy that they had the power to choose their own future. The age of static galactic civilization was ending. Species that had remained unchanged for thousands of years were beginning to experiment with new forms of government, new approaches to science, new methods of cooperation. The rigid hierarchies that had maintained imperial stability were being replaced by flexible networks of mutual assistance. Maria Santos, now serving as humanity's first galactic coordinator, stood in her office overlooking the diplomatic quarter of the imperial capital. Through her windows, she could see beings from dozens of different species working together on projects that would have been impossible under the old imperial system. A Vorthani engineer was teaching human students how to manipulate gravity fields. An ethereal philosopher was collaborating with Nexus logicians on new theories of consciousness. Former imperial guards were learning human military tactics based on cooperation rather than domination. But perhaps most importantly, young beings from across the galaxy were asking questions that had never been asked before. Questions like, why do we do things this way? And what would happen if we tried something different? And how can we make this better for everyone? These were human questions, spreading throughout a galaxy that had forgotten how to change. Santos received a message from Earth, asking for her assessment of the galactic transformation. Her reply was simple. We have shown the galaxy that change is possible. Now we must help them learn that change is not something that happens to you. It is something you choose to create. The dawn of what was to come had begun. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through force of arms. They had done something far more powerful. They had taught the galaxy to conquer itself one choice at a time. And this was only the beginning of what would be possible when an entire galaxy learned to think like humans.